fought long and we fought hard, but the party just wasn't there for us. I'm beginning to think Republicans like losing, though of course that's not really a surprise to any of us. Think about how Republicans raised hundreds of millions of dollars off our backs. But they were MIA these past 2 years since the midterm elections when Clinton's dossier lawyer Mark Elias was spearheading lawsuit after lawsuit in battleground states to change election laws in favor of Democrats. We should have seen that one coming from a mile away in addition to all the fraud. Then they assured us that Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett were solid picks who would do the right thing when the time came. But when the biggest test of their resilience arrived in the form of a lawsuit filed by Texas against the contested battleground states and backed by many other states, they refused to even give it the time of day in court, dismissing it on procedural grounds, which is a dodge if I've ever seen one. Perhaps they feared being painted as partisan and wingmen to the president, which could set them up for possible impeachment attempts or attempts at court packing schemes from Democrats, hell-bent on raising whatever is left of our nation's institutions. Because we all know it's perfectly legal for the left to use the Constitution as toilet paper, essentially, but God forbid Republicans try to hold them to account for it. Then, of course, we had a DOJ under Barr that was largely MIA since November 3rd, and a vice president who decided against kicking back the contested electoral college votes to the states. Now, I understand the argument about Pence not being able to reject the votes outright, but that's different from sending the votes back to the states to deal with, which was a viable option presented to him by the president's attorneys. Either way, it didn't happen. President Trump releasing a statement today reading, quote, "Even though I totally disagree with the outcome of the election and the facts bear me out, nevertheless, there will be an orderly transition on January 20th. I've always said we would continue our fight to ensure that only legal votes were counted. While this represents the end of the greatest first term in presidential history, it's only the beginning of our fight to make America great again." Congress officially certified the controversial Electoral College results in the early morning hours, to which my colleague Christina Bobb joked, quote, "I have an idea. Let's stop the vote count, send everyone home, and replace the electors in the middle of the night. No questions asked. When we wake up, Trump will be president-elect, and you're a racist if you ask any questions." The sad part is, given the events at the Capitol on Wednesday, which the left is trying to make the next Charlottesville, we may never get real answers or actual solutions to these very real concerns of election integrity. But as bad as that scene was yesterday, we need to have perspective. This wasn't an armed takeover, the likes of which we've seen from the left in cities like Portland and Seattle. I mean, just look at what happened to D.C. when it was all Antifa and BLM in the streets for their mostly peaceful summer of love. Plus, the rioters even got applause and other accolades out of the whole deal, despite the trail of actual death and destruction left in their wake nationwide. So when can we expect D.C. police to start taking a knee in solidarity with MAGA protesters? Or when can we expect Kamala Harris to start a fund to bail out anyone arrested yesterday? Funny how only one side is consistent in condemning these matters. And speaking of consistency, remember when protesters occupied Senator Chuck Grassley's office during the Kavanaugh hearings back in 2018, after pushing past police and climbing over barricades? None of these women marchers were shot. But tragically, a reportedly unarmed Air Force veteran from Southern California was fatally shot by authorities inside the Capitol building on Wednesday. One man who was standing next to her when the events unfolded explained what happened next.
And there was a young lady who rushed through the windows. A number of police and Secret Service were saying, "Get back, get down, get out of the way." She didn't heed the call, and as we kind of raced up to grab people and pull them back, they shot her in the neck, and she fell back on me and started saying she was fine, it's cool. And then she started kind of like moving weird, and blood was coming out of her mouth and neck and nose. And I don't know if she's alive or dead anymore. I'm not injured. It could have been me, but she went in first. It was one of us.
Thank you for telling us your story.
Yeah, just make sure people know, because this cannot stand anymore. This is wrong. They don't represent anyone. Not Republican, Democrat, Independent, nobody. And now they'll kill people.
It's likely that there were some agitators, perhaps from Antifa or other left-wing groups, mixed into the crowd, as I've seen myself firsthand at other events that I've been to. But as you just saw in that video, many were there in support of the president, including the young woman who was tragically killed. The president and influential conservative voices immediately called for a stop to the lawlessness, unlike the Democrats and leftists who spent the past year encouraging such actions when it comes to their own supporters. That's a crucial distinction. So here's a group of real patriots booing a group of people smashing windows to gain entry into the Capitol and condemning them as possible Antifa infiltrators. Now, according to the New York Post today, at least 2 known Antifa members were spotted disguised as Trump supporters and were recognized due to their participation at some of the riots in New York City last year. This report should not be confused with an earlier one pushed by the Washington Times, which has since been walked back. But no matter how many infiltrators were or weren't there, as we discussed earlier, there's no denying that our nation is in a crisis of leadership. Joining us now to discuss what happens next is Kurt Schlichter, a senior columnist at Town Hall. Welcome back, Kurt.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great. So we know that the left gets away with this all of the time, but now that the media is pinning this on Trump supporters more broadly, everything we saw at the Capitol yesterday, do you fear what kind of repercussions we could be facing under Biden?
Well, look, I wouldn't put it past